You're the boss.
I am the boss. I am supposed to be in charge of this show, but this is our Thanksgiving edition for 2023, which is going to be a long-form conversation with Paige. Paigeosity is back on the show to talk
Hello,
about.
friends.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about quite a bit today. Some of them hopefully to do with momentum and building cultural momentum, and as well as encouragement in our day and age. So, Paige, I usually like people to introduce themselves because you know your story better than anybody else.
Yeah, so for those of y'all who aren't familiar with me, I go by Paigeosity online. My usual tagline is I draw titties and I stack fitties, and I somehow wound up in the firearms world. But as time has progressed, I've worn many hats and have the tremendous privilege and blessing to work within, I'm gonna say, like the firearms world, like within its community and its inner workings. It's really vast. So it's kind of a, painting a large stroke, large brush stroke there. But no, I get to train with really incredible people, and I am constantly bathing in like a wealth of knowledge from people who are around me. So it's pretty cool going through life, always kind of feeling like I'm the not smartest person in the room. Maybe that's just because, I'm not most of the time, but, I always feel like I'm learning and exploring in this space. So, yeah, I guess I'm a professional artist and learner.
Yeah, there's in studying philosophy, especially the history of philosophy, you see a very distinct shift in world history, especially around the time of the Enlightenment, where this idea of intelligence was somehow like fused with or connected to the idea of goodness. Like only smart people, smart equals good, or smart equals a value to the team. And yet, and so like I think we see some of that carrying forward today with how we look at communities and cultures. Especially, you could probably say most likely in the politics space, our enemies aren't evil, they're stupid kind of mentality. But I don't know, I think that I my mentality has shifted quite a bit, where intelligence, especially in our arena, is not simply being able to articulate a thing well. It's being able to comprehend it, and comprehend it oftentimes or is centered around not only what the thing does, but what my goal is, and being able to align those two properly, which sounds like a very long-winded way of saying, I don't know. I think measuring intelligence and the world that we live in oftentimes ends up with a lot of us with imposter syndrome, but I guess it's better to have it than the opposite. Better to have a little bit of imposter syndrome than to think that you're the best man at everything you do all the time.
I think that that's normal. People are really quick to hyper-diagnose everything. I think mental awareness, like mental illness awareness, is really, really important, especially because we've ignored it for so long. But now there's a hyperfixation on those things. So as far as like, oh, I've got imposter syndrome, who doesn't feel that at time? I feel like that's so normal. It's so normal to look at a situation and go, "Oh shit, I'm the grown up now," right? I think it's that over and over that we experience sometimes. Like, "Oh, I'm the teacher. I'm the parent." Someone has a kid, they're like, "I'm responsible for this fucking life. What the fuck am I doing?" And I think any of us, as any of us who have parents, most of us at some point have seen our parents and gone through the experience of seeing them as people and not as parents. And that phenomenon from the other side is, oh, they're a person. So I don't know, to that imposter syndrome, I don't think that that's so much a lack of intelligence in something, so much as an understanding of our limitations. And I think that that's really important. I think, if I may be so bold as to speak on humility, I think humility comes a lot into play with intelligence, and that humility is not, in fact, the absence of recognizing what you know and what you do, but the embracing of it and the understanding of what you're capable of, so that you're able to grow more and go beyond that.
Yeah. No, I think there's something like that too. Like, and I think there's a short phrase that people like to say is like, the more you know, the more you know you don't know. And on the one hand, like on the one hand, that's true in the sense of, as you continue to engage, I'm just going to go back into studying philosophy again. You start digging into metaphysics and epistemology, and you see the scope and scale of it, or studying medicine. You can't be an expert in every single category, and so you start seeing how much information is out there that you will just never be able to get into, because if in order for you to get there, the amount of investment is greater than what you have or you're willing to put into, because you have to put that investment into something else. In other words, like, you cannot be an expert at absolutely everything. However, where I think that phrase goes wrong is, I think the phrase that, where I've seen this happen multiple times with people, is they'll say something like, well, wisdom isn't, or the more you know, the more you don't know how much you don't know. Well, usually the person saying that is extremely arrogant, and they're putting this forward as like, oh, I'm just so wise because I know nothing, and then they've just basically lobotomized themselves and then claimed that as infinite wisdom. And you're like, well, we're gonna move on here, because that's just, it's just not useful. I should plug this in though before we get further, because I'm going to forget it as we go on. So we are right now. I have a bunch of these. I made some special snacks for people, and yes, they're street legal. You're not going to get in trouble for having them. But for the next the next batch of orders, anyone who goes over to redactedllc.com, we do have stuff in our shop. And if you go up here to the store, you can see what we have. We've got the season 1, Operation 1 Cabin in the Woods merch is on sale right now. But also any of the orders that we get in the next couple hours or days, we will throw in some of these little gummy snacks for you. So it's just kind of a thank you. I like staying on top of it as much as I can. But let's get back into the talk. So we were talking about momentum before the show, and this momentum can be a little bit cerebral. It can be this like conceptual thing. And so I've begun thinking about momentum in our culture, in our community, both on a political scale, for example, like people like Donald Trump are really good at building momentum. Whether or not that momentum is legitimate is another question, but they seem to be really good at building it. You see this in like CQB as well, because you've been to Darcy, and you've seen it, that when people start losing momentum, they start getting bogged down in the house where they're moving through and they're clearing through and they get stuck somewhere. Then as that momentum leaves, that's when all the bad things happen. But then I've also seen you grow in as like your art style and your development as you've gained momentum over time. As also like a participant in this community, there's a lot more involved with that. Would you what do you think about that? I really wanted to talk to you about it because it just seemed like the right time. Maybe it's just me.
I think momentum in this context, if I'm taking what you're saying, is just I think momentum has that phrase of being something that just, it just goes, and then it keeps going, and then it stops, but in maybe a controlled sense of momentum. Because there's the momentum where you're running downhill and you can't really stop yourself. Then there's the momentum where you're controlling your own physics of being, if that makes sense. Like, I started, I've now going to be going on being officially self-employed for about 4 years now, this coming spring. So I guess like 3.5-ish years. And that momentum is more, you take those little downhill moments to get enough to get you uphill a little bit of the way on the other side. So if we're putting this in work context, right, that's, you had a really successful collaboration, post you did really well, something you did got recognition, and suddenly there's a bunch of listens and views and shares and things, right? And then it goes, whoo, like that's like when a video randomly goes viral, and then someone at that momentum is able to ride that out, because eventually you're going to be going up on the other side of a hill, which is going to be the struggle. And suddenly you're pushing that ball upwards, and it might roll backwards and crush you if you weren't preparing yourself for that. The bigger we become, the bigger those hills, both the high sides and the low sides of them, right? So to get from one peak to the other, you have to build stronger momentum to get over a stronger hill, and in such make yourself more capable of carrying that weight going forward. In an art space, specifically, I'll, speak on that, going back to, oh yeah, you have something that works out and that collaboration's there, but momentum is not the same as motivation. I think that's important. It can be a part of it, but it's not all of it. Motivation in and of itself is kind of it is not even kind of, it's a fleeting thing. Motivation is a temporary, ephemeral thing. It's like happiness. It's like, a frustration. These things are in a moment, they give you direction. Inspiration is very much the same. Oh, this is really cool. I'm motivated to do this for a little while, but who the fuck is motivated all the time? Like, motivation is good for you when you haven't cleaned your car out and you're like, you know what? Yeah, I got this new fucking shop vac. Let's go clean out my car, do the thing. Or, spring cleaning motivation, or someone comes and helps you do something in your space and suddenly you're excited to move stuff around. Like that's good and that's positive, but it's temporary. This is where discipline comes in. So to keep momentum is to, I'd say, keep pace. You're gonna have momentum sometimes, and you're not gonna really know when that strikes. It's cool when you prepare for it, but we don't always see when we're just gonna be coasting downhill and then up on the other side. Sometimes it's we don't prepare for how big the hill is on the other side that we're gonna have to push up either. So that pacing yourself is really critical, I think, in those moments of discipline, and that's what's going to keep you going when you lose that steam, when you are out of reach of things like inspiration or motivation.
Yeah, I think about it in something like there's actually a really good book on the subject, and that would be The War of Art and Turning Pro. Those are two books by Stephen Pressfield, where he talks about turning pro is sort of like you do the work every day. And he's a writer, and so I'm going to have some connection to him. I like to write, but his writing in this book, the Turning Pro, he talks about how you'll see people who are trying to get into trying to write. They're waiting for the muse to catch them and carry them through, and the muse is very much so that motivation. At least in my worldview, is just this muse idea is like that. When the muse grabs you, you move, and that's motivation. But you don't know when that's going to happen, and you don't get to choose when it's going to happen, and you do not get to have dictation over it. And so the responsibility of the writer is to sit down and write every day, so that the day that the muse hits him, he already has his pen in hand, and he's not trying to figure out how to string sentences together when it hits. And so I think of that, like, that's where I think about it, whether it's in training, whether it's in we see this as sort of a motivational sense in regards to competition shooters as well, where you see a lot of the gun culture uses a very petty version of shame to try to motivate each other, and in some circles that works really well and for good effect. But generally speaking, this idea is like, well, if you're not fit, you're gonna die. If you're not dry firing, you're gonna die. And it's just this sort of like, eventually you're just gonna die, man. But really what you learn is that you do the hard work, you do that 15 20 minutes of dry fire every day. Peter Ildefonso has been inspiring me to do this a little bit more. You do that little 15 to 20 minutes of dry fire every day, and then when the muse hits, that's when a breakthrough happens. That's when something clicks, and that momentum. And then I even going back to another, there was another subject that I have, but I kind of lost it in that piece.
Well, to your point, going back of the muse, right? Waiting on that moment of inspiration. People forget the arts, writing, music, all these things. I'm really of the belief that if there is such a thing as talent, that talent is maybe just the gift of obsession or the gift of perhaps passion, because all these things are a skill. Writing's a skill, art's a skill. You fucking pick up anything right now. I don't care if it's the goddamn violin. I don't care if it's juggling. I don't care if it's trying to do a fucking handstand or learning magic tricks. You pick something up right now and you do it every single goddamn day for hours a day for 2 years, and you're going to be incredible. They say it takes approximately 10,000 hours to master a thing, right? So the amount of times I think people will dismiss the possibility of getting through something on discipline alone because they think someone's talented is fucking bullshit. Like, there's so many times in my life people go, oh, you're so lucky you're an artist. I'm like, lucky? The oldest piece of artwork I own is literally from April of 1994. I was a year and a half old on my mother's lap in church. When I say art, like, it wasn't just, monkey fisting a fucking pen and scribbling. I was diligently working my little 1.5-year-old brain, doing little single lines, and almost every single day of my fucking life since, I have been creating in some capacity with very little exception. So people will say, oh, it's a talent. Like, no, that's not a talent. Talent doesn't excuse you from the amount of work. I have poured at this point in my life thousands and thousands and thousands of not just hours, but days of my life into these things, into these skills. And when it comes to, you bring up the concept of shaming, a mild shaming in like the firearm space and stuff like that. Well, it's even in things like therapy. I'm going to bring this up, right? Women are, they have a propensity to better articulate themselves and their feelings. And by saying the thing, they can learn, adapt, and feel better about the thing. Men are solution oriented. So while there might be that light shaming, while people are generally, motivation, positive reinforcement and motivation powered, men specifically need solutions. So when you hear something like get fit or you're going to die, well, the solution is get fit. Like that's an X equals Y thing, which I think is really important and why it works, why fat shaming works. But fat shaming doesn't work. The only people who say that are fucking women, straight up, like straight up. And it's like there's nothing wrong that level of thinking works with your biological, preset. But for men specifically, which is, the tactical world's a male dominated space, yeah, the answer is shame. Shame fucking works. Like, get off your goddamn ass and do the thing. Doesn't mean that you don't still get treats and head pats and you do a good job. I don't care who you are. Everyone needs that once in a while. Like, I make a point to it might sound, whatever, but like I make a point to compliment guys when I see something I like, that's a nice looking shirt on you, dude. Like, man, your forearms look good. Or like, I saw a guy the other day, he had beautiful fucking eyelashes. He was straight, but I was like, God damn, you have beautiful eyelashes. He was like, oh, like, thank you. Like,
Oh, oh,
it goes a
yeah.
long way. Men need that, especially.
No, it's for the terminally online. They're very much so aware of the principle where women get complimented so often that they don't even notice it, whereas men get complimented so rarely that even the slightest thing makes their day. And it's funny. It really is funny because it very often is true. However, I think both parties have come to recognize, and parties in a loose sense have come to recognize that nobody likes pandering or flattery either. And so,
You can't say nobody.
oh, that's true.
You can't say nobody because there are lots of people where, let me tell you, flattery will get you fucking everywhere.
Yeah.
Worked in sales a long time.
Oof, oof, oof. Yeah, well, you get that one. So, yeah, it's an interesting business. Let's try to stick back to the culture and the community here because I think you're onto something too. The other thing about momentum too, and this is where I see us right now, is like I think you and I were talking about this a little bit before the show and how this has been a hard year for a lot of people.
Oh, fuck yeah.
It's been a very tough year, and some of those things I'm getting to this point where like I think I'm starting to be better at talking about it now, but some of the things that have made this year very difficult for people are intensely personal. They're things that even if you were to sit down and have a 2-hour Jordan Peterson conversation, you're probably not getting to the heart of it. There's this line in the Old Testament that says, "No man knows the heart of another," and while that is kind of scary, and it's not scary as in like a terrifying sense, but scary in the sense of it's literally just the unknown that can't be achieved. There is a sense to it that makes sense to me in that there are things that are like even in my own personal life that are there that will just I will never be able to explain them to somebody else. The closest opportunity would be my wife. And then but so like in our community, I think is in this specifically 2023 has been a very difficult year for a lot of people, for most of us. Many of those things are entirely personal, and many of them are actually community oriented, whether it's the brace ruling that hit in the spring, or it was the way that affected the economy, or it is the kind of the slow year for anything creative and productive, and so that means everything kind of gets drawn out, or it's the anticipation for 2024, or it's that sense of loneliness that pervades the community from time to time. And so I think momentum. One of the reasons why momentum has been important for me in the fall is especially right now is looking at it going, well, we don't know what 2024 is going to bring, whether it's election season, whether it's natural disasters, or it's cultural upheaval. We've seen quite a bit in the last couple of years, but the issue is that I think we're seeing this demoralization start to take root, and that's why I want to talk about momentum. Is that we need to maintain it, we need to build it up and keep it going.
If I may interject on that, I think the demoralization and the loneliness that you speak of, say the word community a lot. The word community needs to be the single most important thing that any of us actually wholly embrace, because it's like, oh, about problems in the community. No, the problem is community. It's lack of community. Anything, literally any fucking thing. Pick whatever religion you want, pick whatever crazy political denomination you want. Whatever thing that you want to do is possible so long as there are enough people who do it, right? And I will never stop preaching this, because I believe that community is the single most fucking important thing. Like, so long as you have a group of people who, I'm going to say, a morally congruent society is a high trust society. So having people that you are morally congruent with, but willing to, at the very least, accept an open dialogue with people who aren't. I mean, shit, Snoop Dogg's Mormon now, right? Like, anything can happen with the right freaking integration of welcoming someone into your space.
Didn't Snoop Dogg and Mary Kay, who, not Mary Kay, the lady who went to prison for like tax fraud, but she does, Martha Stewart.
Oh,
Martha,
yeah. Yeah,
Snoop
I don't know.
Dogg.
I'm just saying, like, when you see that, like, everyone needs something. It's why, even when you look back to, the last several years now of political disarray, I mean, fuck, centuries, right? It's just being a human. But you see the groups of people who come together under the guise of negativity, right? Under the guise of hate. And it's like, oh yeah, the pink hats in the 2016 election, oh, you hate Trump? I hate Trump. They have nothing else in common. They're otherwise deplorable fucking human beings, but they're able to come together over these things. You see this in circles of gossip where people have nothing emotionally to latch onto except for negativity. So that's what they go to. Uh,
Ooh.
a
Ooh.
hard lesson I learned actually at the beginning of this year. Had some conflict, big ripples in a small pond, but it was something where I had to really reflect on some things, because I had people who I really cared about, who I deeply considered my friends, and had reached out to because I felt, anomalies and frustrations. And there was I had made a like backhanded grievance in the presence of someone who I thought I knew. And that grievance wasn't anything crazy, but it was enough, in the word of momentum, it was enough for someone to build momentum on, to create something that created tremendous misplaced conflict. And in all of this, I did a lot of assessment. I looked at the situation and I was like, okay, even if I believe that these people are, verifiably wrong, and like what's happened to their information, like what are they right about? How did they come to this conclusion? I had to think about myself and how I convey myself. To your point of, no one knows the heart of another, right? Who I am and how I see myself doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. How you perceive me, how my parents perceive me, how my partner perceives me, how my sibling, my best friend, whoever, everyone in our lives, the person you cut off in traffic on accident, perhaps, everyone is going to perceive you in some fucking way that isn't true to how we perceive ourselves. And sometimes our perception of ourselves isn't really true. For that reason, I think that's important. But on that note of the negativity element, I realized that we can have wholly trusting and open, vulnerable relationships with people without ever saying something negative about somebody else. If the only emotion that you can bond with is negativity in somebody, you need to assess that, because, hate and love have equal passion, but one is founded in this low hanging fruit. It's easy to access. And so I have gotten a lot better about who I share my grievances with. I almost covet my negativity, because negativity is the one thing that can be misunderstood. Positivity, someone might be like, oh, they're disingenuine, or, oh, I don't like them. Like, fine, whatever. But for someone to say something about that, or say like, oh, well, they said this, or like, well, that's not true, because they don't usually talk like that. I want to be seen as that person, the one who doesn't like have to bond with people over talking shit about someone else. I'll be there for you, but
There's
not that way.
You bring up a really good point, and something that I've been in military circles as well as various other arenas, right? So I've worn many hats in my life. Uh, Military, special operations, private contracting, security, surveillance, counter surveillance, EP, blah 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 blah, media, journalism, traveling, whatever. So I've had a lot of opportunities, and I saw this. I want to say it's not quite a phase, but it's much less common in my orbit than it has been in the past, and some of that is probably because of where I'm at now. I'm running a show here. I have to have some sort of like, maybe not script, but I have a certain position that I want to make sure is presented, certain values and character traits that are participant. And then there's another part about it, though, that I think stands forward is that, I'm sorry, that's not even the right way of saying it. I've seen this happen before. How many times has this happened to you where you're getting to know somebody, whether you're working with them or you're supposed to connect in some way of a circle, and the only way that they seem to know how to get to know you is to find something that you mutually hate?
Yeah, it's low hanging fruit.
It's low hanging fruit. So like one of the examples was this is like in the private contracting world, especially when you get into the higher tiers and stuff, it's a very small pool. And I'm not in the top, and so I'm not going to like speak to everybody in the coolest of cool areas. I'm not a tier 1 freaking CIA agent spy. I obviously don't block my face because I'm not worried about the agency finding me. But the the point being said is, redacted's not redacted. Irony. The thing about it is, you work with, you might work with a MARSOC guy, a ranger guy, and a SEAL, or you might have like 2 ranger guys and a SEAL. And what happens is, every once in a while you'll hear this is the guys who are all from the same background will kind of get together and they'll have common background, but they'll start. I'll have people like try to talk to me as if like they want to be my friend because they think I hate that guy too, and it's like, that's not, I'm not built, I don't build my relationships on mutual hatred. The enemy of my enemy in a cultural sense is not my friend. The enemy of my enemy is a strategic pawn to be wielded, crafted, launched like a missile, and then forgotten. That's very different than the enemy of my enemy is a friend. And so I think every once in a while I see this rise up in the community in cultural conversations and stuff like that, where it's somebody is trying to build mutual camaraderie off of hatred, for not even hatred, but just like disdain for that thing over there. And it never works. It's just such a cheap foundation. And I haven't seen it for a long time.
I want to make a note too that I feel like there's a difference between venting is solution oriented. Okay. Complaining and gossiping is not. It's like just jerking yourself off with like negative feelings as the lubricant. And that's what they are. That's all it is. And so like, if you're listening to this and you're someone who's just like, oh shit, like I connect that way with people all the time, like fucking stop it. Even if it's over politics or things like that, doesn't mean that we can't have serious conversations. Doesn't mean that there's not a place to share valid grievances and like seek solutions. But unless it's your spouse or your childhood best friend, it's like if someone's coming to you, I literally posted this to my fucking ex the other day, Twitter, whatever. And I had put, for fuck's sake, if someone is coming to you and they are always talking shit about everyone, unless they are your spouse or your childhood best friend, they are doing that to you. They are 100% telling people, well, no, not them. They're not lying to me. They're not doing that. Shut the fuck up. Yes, they are. It's that way. And it's that same cognitive dissonance like you get with someone, because they cheated on their partner to be with you. And you're like, oh yeah, they're going to be really honest with me because they left that person for, you're insane. Like that's never going to fucking work out. It's that same mentality that gets pulled through from place to place to place. And you need to take a step back and realize that this is like, it's really easy to be a shitty person. It is so easy to be a shitty person. Being good, like people are good, not because they're just good and nothing bothers them, but because in the face of absolute adversity, in the face of temptation, they still decide, they make the conscious decision to be better than it or to work through it in a healthy way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nope, that's a very long-standing principle. There's a really bad but continuous argument in kind of the world of culture as well as politics, and that is, are people basically good or people basically evil? Or is it, are people fundamentally good or people fundamentally evil? And you see this argument throughout history too, whether it's Gnosticism and the Platonistic Platonistic Gnosticism, which believed that, well, what is really you is like your soul or the idea of you, but you're trapped in a body, and so the body is evil, but you is actually good, and the world is evil, and it's evil because we've been trapped in a prison by the demiurge, which is this like, it's a very, again, this is, we're almost talking about, we're actually talking
It's
about,
Jesus mysticism. Like
it's not even
Gnosticism is that a little bit though.
not well. The Gnostic cults came. There was a group of Gnostic cults that came out of Christianity and rewrote the book, particularly on the metaphysics level, to state that though the being that is known as God is actually the demiurge, and he's a false god, and he's got us captured in his world, and the real God is something beyond that, and it's just
Oh, interesting. I have a couple friends who are Gnostic, but it doesn't sound like it's like that. So, huh.
Gnostic, as in really, because Gnosticism is a pretty specific term. It's
Yeah,
just
no, I call it like I call it like mystic Jesus. It's just like, yeah, walking between like, you're fighting demons in the dream world and all this other shit. Sounds pretty fucking lit, honestly. I'm like, man, mysticism Jesus, like that sounds fucking cool. Like a lot of internal battles of uh uh I mean, to be fair, it's a huge Mexican family who is Gnostic, so maybe they have their own flavor.
yeah, I don't. I would have. I mean, I would want to even have a conversation to see what it's like, because it is an interesting subject, especially because the West is so bad at addressing this idea of like spiritual warfare and spirituality that
Yeah, I don't know a
someone.
lot about it, so I can't really say.
Oh, I know a thing or two about it. Hey, now we go
Okay,
down
well,
the
I'm
rabbit
just gonna
hole.
take that.
No, it's fine. And what you see is, you like, this is even a cultural example, is that the last 100 years of particularly American, but to a greater extent Western history, has been a series of disconnected events that, when compiled, has created our position where we're at right now. And that is, so feminism was based on like a legitimate grievance, but then it opened a way for a form of economic slavery, and then you had the cultural revolution in the civil revolution around the 60s, and that created a pathway for it like it had a good and a bad that brought forward with it, and the good being, there's this recognition of consistency with what we believe is to be right and true and good, but then the negativity of it is it brought an inroad for things to be twisted and taken out of format. In other words, certain things that were given too much authority. And then you had the sexual revolution, which on the one hand had a legitimate grievance as well, but then also brought up more or less like a licentiousness of consumerism. I think what I've come to recognize, is that this idea of feminism produced the materialism that we saw in the 1990s. And so from there, all of these different belief systems and all of these different like small avenues of approach to metaphysics left the West particularly bankrupt when it came to understanding spiritual things, which has a connection to our mental health issue. And as a result, like a person who no longer has a rubric by which to make evaluations of spirituality, we just grab onto anything that we can. We just latch onto anything that gives us a semblance of feeling and hope, whether it's New Age mysticism or it's these different belief systems. And as a result, we grab onto it because in the words of Post Malone the Great, give me something real. There is this reality that people are trying to grab onto, but what they end up pulling in with it is all this like, not cultural baggage, but spiritual, not foolishness, but like spiritual weight, spiritual damage is another way of saying it. Or actually, you open the door for bad things to happen. And it's not the first time it's happened in history, but it's a
I mean,
certain.
how can you not these days? Like everything that we do, like men need. I stand by this. Man in general. I won't speak on like women right now into totality, but it's like man need to touch grass,
Mm-hmm.
to hang out with bros, and to blow some loads. You need all three of those things. Guys got to fucking touch grass, chill with the bros, and empty your balls. Because if you don't have those things, you start to fall apart. Like guys need that. They fucking need that shit. And we're in this world where so many guys don't get to do sometimes any of those fucking things. They're isolated. They're not outside. They're not with companions or with community. So they're without essential community or connection to the world. Like, okay, the other day, I was helping out Grantham on one of his recent recce videos, and we were out in the hills. I just went and like did some little like effects makeup shit for him. But we're out there hiking and whatever, and he dropped this line that I just fucking love. He's like, I want to make you as useful as an 11-year-old in the 1890s or something like that. I'm like, holy shit. Like that was the best way to play. It's like they can make a fire, they could find a way to get warm, like they could do certain shit, they could hunt and skin an animal. And I'm like, oh my God, like just on that baseline level, most men in a modern day aren't afforded that space. I can't say they're not afforded it, but they're obstructed from it because it is achievable. All these things are achievable. It is possible to fucking do. And what happens is we get so wrapped up in our dopamine doubt cycles because we are programmed to have positive reward centers in the brain, reward the parts of us that doubt ourselves and get depressed and whatever. Even now, look at mimetic culture, right? Constantly, like, who isn't joking about suicide? Who listening to this doesn't joke about killing yourself at least 3 times a day? Because I certainly do. And that's just, you just joke about it so it doesn't happen. And that's how it goes. But it's like, we all just have a little joke, like, oh, 9 mil looking good for a snack. What up? Like, oh, can't add to gun statistics. We got to find a different way to do that. You have those constant jokes of that because that's how it is for all of us. We're all joking about depression and fucking anxiety because it's what most of us are all plagued by. And that's by design because fear builds perfect consumerism. So
yes, it certainly does. And you can see this within the firearms industry of like, how many times do you see an ad for somebody breaking into your house at 2:00 in the morning? Like, dude, I am 99% more likely to suck start a shotgun than I am to be invaded. I'm just going to be right on. And this is something that I'm going to say with a little bit of crassness. I'm very thankful that I've never really had like a suicide bend. I've never been in that. Maybe never is not the right term, but like, that has not been my burden, to put it gently. And so, yet we still have our jokes and stuff like that. We still have our humor and our lightheartedness. But
I hope you're never there.
As a white male veteran in my 30s, I am the premium statistic for that issue.
Well, you're not, because you have Christ.
Oh yeah, that's true.
That's honestly the biggest fucking thing, right? Like, going back to being morally bankrupt and what you're talking about, right? Like, we need community, and that community, I don't really care. I mean, yeah, community can be founded in like shitty places, but there's healthy and there's unhealthy communities. I've seen really unhealthy communities of every denomination of Christian. I've seen really healthy communities of Mormonism. I've seen the opposite on both of those things. It just comes down to, people too will reject a lot of religion on the premise that they go to church and they see the smokers, the sinners, the hypocrites, and then they leave it. And it's like, well, you didn't try God, you just avoided people. Like, that's different. Like, God isn't that, and whatever. I don't really think poorly necessarily of spirituality. I think of it from like a theological standpoint. Like, I've always found religion very interesting. And it's so dense, right? Everything is, to our point earlier, we were saying you can't learn all of the things about all of the things. Like, every religion is so deep and complex and of its own that, I've found my very own spiritual journey. Like, people are like, oh, you believe in God? I'm like, why not? Like, comes down like, why not? Like, especially if you don't have anything. Like, especially if you don't have anything, why not believe in something greater? Why not have that?
Yeah, I'm reading some of Bonhoeffer right now, and Bonhoeffer was a German theologian during the time of the Nazis, and he was famously a part of an assassination attempt to kill Hitler. And as a result, so he's this like German preacher guy who's doing his thing. And and the Nazis didn't like that too much, and so eventually they imprisoned him and either found evidence or accused him of being in a plot to assassinate Hitler. Historically speaking, I believe he actually was a part of something. However, being a part of something can be pretty small. Still, he has this line in one of his books that I'm reading right now, and I'm not going to actually quote the line because I can't remember it, and plus I wouldn't quote it anyway because it's in German, and my German is not so great right now. Meine Deutsche. But he says something like, any community not built on Christ is doomed to fail. And this is doubly true for Christians, is that if your Christian community, at the foundation of your Christian community, is something other than Christ, it is doomed to fail. I was like, huh. That's kind of a savage thing to say, because you're like, but I want to have my Christ and eat it. I want to have my cake and eat it too, kind of thing. And but ultimately it has to be true. It has to be true, because you can't build a house on a false foundation and expect it to stand. And we see this through time. Why do empires fall? Because they build, they construct, they lose their foundation, they fall. They build, they construct, they lose their foundation, they fall. And this pattern can be seen in the macro scale, whether it's the fall of Rome, because that's what everybody's obsessed about arbitrarily, or it's the rise and fall of the Napoleonic Empire, or it's the rise and fall of a revival in the 1960s, or you see these things kind of pick up steam and roll down hill. And so what I find encouragement from that is that just because we see communities fail, they fall apart, whether it's like a microcosm group, it's a group within our culture itself, or whether it's in a bigger scale. It's tragic to see that happen, but that's what happens when communities eventually fall apart, and then those pieces scatter and have to rebuild in a new way.
Well, if people ever doubt it, I think you and I talked about this on the last podcast. Last time I was on this podcast with you, people ever doubt the hive mind power of religion? Look at the fucking Taliban. Look how few people it takes to believe in one thing, have one moral code, one set of fucking principles, one goal. Look how much shit you can get done.
Mhm.
Like, I'm not saying which way or the other you feel about that, but it's like you cannot look at these isolated groups of religion in the way that they operate and be like, oh, that's ineffectual. No, it's highly effective. It's so effective that it's fucking dangerous. It's when you get that disagreement in those nuances that you get things like Israel versus Hamas. Like it's, and we don't even go on a rabbit hole of that shit. But it's just like, to your point of religion, like, yeah, places with a community without a central thing, and that way a central moral congruency falls apart. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you were talking about something else earlier, and gosh, I am having a horrible TBI brain today, because we were talking about this in the sense of community building. One of the things that I've had a couple of conversations with some dear friends about this recently, and one of them was saying that he's been a part of gun culture for a while, and I can attest to that. But he's in a time right now where he was a part of one group, and I was involved in that, but then I moved, and so then now he's looking to integrate into another like microcosm of the community in the area that he's at. And what he feels like is it's not like he feels like, that's not the right way of saying it. He has a challenge where he looks out and everybody else is in their group, everybody else is in their community, and he feels alone. And the funny thing is like, I know that feeling because I have it like every third week. And then it goes away. It comes, but it's not the same thing. And so I wanted to ask you, I have this paradigm that I start to see is like, you have the elitists up here, and you've got the resentful people down here, and they're fighting each other all the time, and they're complaining and bickering and fighting, and these guys won't let anybody in, and that's what you call gatekeeping, except for the gatekeeping's really just the shitty middle class. And then you've got like this this resentful people on the bottom. But for people who are alone, we spend a lot of time on this show, and we spend a lot of time in community for people talking about getting into a group or building a community, building their own culture. Whereas sometimes you have people who have already existing within a community. What about those people inviting people in? Do you have any idea on?
Are you asking about the ones being alone from everything, or the elitist versus the like ankle biters?
I don't really, the elitist versus the ankle biters conversation is actually not very interesting to me, because it's all easily disposable.
But as far as the alone person, like, what about them?
Yeah,
So,
that's what I'm more interested in.
Something I heard the other day that kind of really hit me between the eyes. I have days where I feel entirely self-hating, like just a complete fucking failure, like all these things. And I saw this comment from someone in a random forum that was talking to someone else who was struggling with these, and they told them self-hating is another way to make yourself the center of attention. And you need to be better at thinking less of yourself, not in the way of like you demean yourself. Like we are the protagonist of our own story, but that hit really hard because what's the difference between feeling self-hating and the line between that kind of having a victim mentality? Like in a moment, it really is that. And in a moment, we feel like an elevated sense of emotional connection in that moment. Like, oh, I'm so alone. I'm so misunderstood. And even if it's some nuance or variety of that, it really is that moment of being the misunderstood teenager, but amplified. And I see that in adults and all kinds of things. So even everyone needs to realize that we are every age we've ever been. So if you are in a moment having, heart beating fast, you have a crush on somebody, suddenly you're 14 again, shutting down in an argument because you had, with a partner because you had an abusive parent, and suddenly you're 6 years old and you're not able to say anything, right? Starting a new job and being nervous and like, oh shit, I feel like I'm 22 again, or being out one night and partying and being like, oh yeah, fuck, I feel like I'm a teenager. Like we are every age we've ever fucking been, every element of grief, all of these things. So when we have those moments of us being like, oh, fuck, I'm this thing, where are you in that? Right? Like you were probably like, those are such prepubescent or pubescent feelings. Like truly, I'm misunderstood, I'm alone, I'm whatever. We're really not. Like we're alone in the way that, yeah, we got to take accountability for yourself. Like even, mental illness, these things, whatever, they may not be our fault, but they're still our responsibility. So yeah, yes, we are alone in our accountability and our responsibility as an individual, but as a whole, we're only as separate as our emotions afford us to be. And we really swung hard the other way with this hyperfixation of mental illness and awareness, where people are now like, oh, I have this thing, I have that, I need drugs, I need whatever. No, dog. I think you and I have talked about this too, about the everyone's got a whole bunch of shit wrong with them, right? Emotionally feeling these things, whatever. The list to fix these things is very small. Yes, beware of people who have simple fixes for complex solutions. It's really not that fucking complex though. Simple doesn't mean easy, but it is simple. When you're feeling like shit, what's your diet? What's your sleep? Are you working out? Have
At
you done all
least
three of those things?
at least start those three.
Like if you haven't, even if you're still fucking sad, going back to momentum and like how we keep things going and whatever, right? When we wake up, make your fucking bed, do the dishes, take a shower. Because even if you're sad, even if you're still fucking sad, at least you're sad and clean.
Yeah,
Even if you're still fucking sad, at least you got something done. Even if you're still fucking angry, at least you were productive. And we need that.
Yeah, so I think about this too. I think about it in this way. There's let's see, what was it? Maybe 10 years ago. It might have been about 10 years ago. Maybe it was a little closer to 7 at this point in time. Let's see, it's 2023. Yeah, maybe 10-ish years ago. There was, I wouldn't call it a movement exactly, but there was a shift in the way that culture was approaching things. And the culture, and some of it was I had moved from one community to another. I was no longer a military guy, I was a veteran. And I had moved back home to spend some time there. And it was this idea of like, no more Mr. Nice Guy. Now, this is going to be this is the speech directly towards men, is that if your mentality and your character, your person is entirely built around being the nice guy, and it is easier to identify it in warning signs than it is to see it as like a well-written personality. But if you find yourself constantly complaining to yourself about somebody else's success, you find yourself constantly complaining about the world being against you. And I am criticizing myself in this way. And if you're constantly complaining about how you're the virtuous person, but the world doesn't want virtuous people, they want something else. And I'll actually criticize myself in this case, and this is why I've been thinking about momentum, is that I have a certain issue with how social media functions. And one of the issues that I have with social media is that I can get is that I'll sit here and create long form content, or we'll have conversations, or we'll do podcasts like this, or we'll have conversations about philosophy, and I'll have to work very hard to make it happen. But then to make it succeed to any extent, or whatever you want to use that phrase, right? And that has to be like putting art and time into it, or for every minute you see somebody talking about philosophy, there should be roughly 2.5 hours of reading. And so like I've got my library. I have to read those books. It doesn't mean that every single book is like a magical experience, and I've got to slog through shit and try to find the details and sort through it, which is something that I enjoy doing. But what I'm contending with on social media are actually, it's very rarely am I contending with my peers. I'm contending with like e-thoughts and like and softcore pornography on Instagram, and this whole mentality of this just like social media. And I do this every time, is that whenever I get a ding from Instagram, and then they'll say your content can't be shared for one reason or the other, I go immediately to the discover page. I'll go to the discover page and I'll screenshot like some of the first videos, and they're almost always um like troll farms that are used to sell OnlyFans pages or something like that. They're always to this very extent of like, you built an algorithm to punish my content, but you could have spent it on one where a person is literally selling children for sex trades. It's like, excuse me here, your priorities are all wrong. And I can get angry about that, and I can throw my hands up at the world, and I can become pissed off at it, or I can figure out, then this is not, I can literally just try to figure out what my goal is. Like, how do I pivot? How do I make this stronger? How do I make this work better? Instead of, well, maybe your goal is not to try to get, maybe my goal is not to try to speak to the person who has so little self-discipline that they're okay engaging in that level of moral ambiguity. Like they're not my audience or whatever. But it's very easy as the person of this mentality of the nice guy, especially as a guy, is that you're creating a martyr complex instead of doing the good that you're supposed to do. Shut up and do the work. That's what it takes. Shut up and do the work.
There's this great essay, I'm going to say, it was an old article posted to cracked.com back in like 2012. It's an old article, and it's like the 6 ways to be a better person. It's a great article. I'll send you the link if you want to share. I mean, who cares like who it was written by or whatever? Like the elements are really tried and true, and it breaks things down, and it just talks about how, in this world, everybody wants, like this world only accepts you for what you have to offer them. Like even being a mother is a job. Like you're offering, making, I say even being a mother, like that's a huge job, right? It's a job, a series of jobs, a sequence of tasks and skills to raise human beings, right? No one gives a fuck about the dirt your tree grows in. They care about the fruit. There's a biblical quote to that is actually referenced in that article I'm referencing, where it's just like, yeah, no, like no one cares about your dirt. Like they care about the fruit that you produce. How can you be useful for others? So you get the nice guy. And I hate that term nice guy. Like the nice guy is transactional, right? If you do something for something in return, that's business. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but don't piss on my back and tell me it's raining, right? The good man does what needs to be done because it's simply what needs to be fucking done.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of guys will be like, oh, I have all these things. Well, guess what? If your only good qualities are listing the things that you're not, well, I'm not a shitbag. I'm not a douchebag. I'm not this. You don't have any good fucking qualities. Have a useful skill. And you're like, oh, this year, whatever. No, fuck your resolutions. Fuck waiting till next Tuesday. Either you start today or fuck off. Like that's how it goes. When you're doing things, like I'm gonna take a moment just to divvy a tiny bit, like on our note of momentum and stuff. I've talked about this a few times, but I think that this is really important. For those of you who are nerds, you'll know what I say when I reference the Silmarillion. Others of you may not. I say nerds, but Lord of the Rings is a classic, let's be honest. The Silmarillion is effectively the Bible for the Lord of the Rings, right? It is said in the Silmarillion that God made human as his favorite race. And ipso facto, gave humans the gift of man, which was mortality. You might be like, oh, how is that a fucking gift, right? Well, unlike the elves and the dwarves and all these other races that were tied to the great magic of the world, right? Humans and their immortality, or in their lack of immortality, were made as the get shit done race. They were given the indomitable human spirit. how we see, perhaps the ant or the rabbit that proliferates and does things quickly, right? The humans were created as this element to get things done, to make stuff happen, to build and adapt quicker than anything else. And because of that ability, because of that indomitable fucking human spirit and the perseverance to keep going into something else, they outlived the elves. They outlived the dwarves. They outlived the orcs. They outlived the age of fucking magic. Human spirit was greater than magic, so much that we came into the day of man that we're still in. So even though this might be a snippet from fantasy, what isn't fantasy is the indomitable human spirit, is the ability to adapt, is the ability to become that. So when we sit on our phones, when we sit back, we feel alone, we feel anxious, we feel those itches of frustration for not doing the thing. It's because that's in you too. And it's in you to go fucking do something, to get off your ass and go connect with that, go connect with nature, go connect with someone, to develop a fucking skill. Because so many of us are rotting when we don't do something. We're rotting in our opportunity. And this might be a moment where you hear this and you feel fucking motivated. Like, yeah, fuck that. I'm going to go lift weights. I'm going to go make my goddamn bed. But how do you build doing that, right? It comes in going back to how we're reward centric, right? As a species, we need rewards. The reward comes in after doing the fucking thing. It doesn't come while doing the thing. The reward isn't when I'm sitting over a commission that I want to kill myself over because I've been working on it for 6 months and I hate how the piece came out. The reward isn't there. The reward is when I give it to a client and they are fucking elated in what it is that I made. That's the reward. I've been using for so long, my anxiety is the thing, being like, oh, I feel bad that I'm not getting this thing done. And now I have to put that pressure on myself. Yeah, I need that pressure to get this done. No, why isn't my reward how good the person feels when I make them the thing that they like? It's not in doing it. You got to feel like shit and get through it. It's like the hardest part of going to the gym is showing up. So
yeah. Oh, it's a consistent one though. Yeah. Like it is you, if you're going to work out, you're going to work out. You just got to get there. Just take the little step. I remember a day in Ranger School. I get to go back to my roots now. I remember a day in Ranger School, and I had the unfortunate day of getting the radio and being the radio guy the day we had to climb one of the tallest, steepest mountains. And that was not the first day of the exercise either, because I had to do mountain phase twice. So for all those who are elitists in the Ranger Battalion community, like I had to recycle mountain phase. The reason for that is because the RI didn't know what a back blast area was on a AT4, but let's not get specific. The point being said is, so I this is my second pass through Ranger School. I made the RTO, the radio guy, and the radio's heavy, and you got to carry it up a hill, and you're already malnourished, and you're already hungry, and you're already tired, and it's like the whole day is basically walking uphill.
Is this selection?
No, this is Ranger School. So Ranger Selection at the time was called RIP, and then you had Ranger School.
Okay.
So the nuances of Ranger Battalion is you go to I call it selection because it's just so much easier to convey to the outside world. But it's at my time it was called RIP, Ranger Indoctrination Program, and now it's called RASP, Ranger Assessment and Selection Program. And it used to be 3 weeks, and now it's like 5 or 7 or 9. I don't know. I'm old now, so look at me. But the point is that selection gets you into Ranger Battalion, but Ranger School is sort of like a rite of passage within a rite of passage within Ranger Battalion. You get into battalion by passing RIP, by getting selected out of RASP or RIP or RASP, right? Then you get to your battalion, and then you've got a period of time where they're kind of sorting you out, whether they're going to kick you out or they're going to keep you in. And you usually do a deployment or 2, or in my case 3, and you got this kind of like, all right, so when your team leader thinks that you're ready to go to Ranger School, they send you to Ranger School. And in my day, if you failed Ranger School, with a few exceptions, if you failed Ranger School, you got kicked out of battalion. That was sort of like the last thing. And if you passed Ranger School, you got your tab, which means you moved you from the lower caste to the upper caste. It was a caste structure. People without tabs were less than people. They were kind of, they weren't less than people, but they might as well have been.
They were the grunts.
Well, beyond grunts. Like, it's kind of like you didn't have the same rights and you didn't have the same rights afforded to you as a private or as an untabbed guy. There was something about it. And However, Rangers would usually still go to bat for each other, even if they were not a tab guy. And to be clear, I know plenty of people who never got their tab who are solid dudes. And I've known plenty of people who got their tab who weren't. But that's just kind of the way it works. But so Rangers School is where you get your tab. And by the time a guy in Ranger Battalion goes to Ranger School, he's supposed to be already pretty much guaranteed to pass it, because your team leader should have taught you all the things that you're going to do, taught you all the skills that you're going to need. So the day you're doing knots, you're not figuring out how to do a bowline. The day that you're doing land navigation, you're not figuring out how to do land navigation. The day that the days that you're doing,
Sure, they have to prep you.
yeah, so you're supposed to be set up. So I meant, but there still is the suck of Ranger School of just like some days you just get it. Like most days were actually not too bad. There were plenty of days in Ranger School where I thought I was in Skyrim. This was just like I was tripping balls, and it was it was a beautiful environment. The mountainous region of Appalachia was just gorgeous, and there's little clumps of snow, and I get to marvel at God's creation. But then there were plenty of days where it was like, yeah,
You're carrying a radio up a mountain.
you're carrying a radio up a mountain, and so the process, you know how you get up that mountain, you literally put 1 foot here, and then you put 1 foot here, and you let your toe hit your heel, and you just keep one step at a time. Just you're so tired you can't do your mountain climber steps, so you're just literally going bloop 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 bloop, and for 9 hours you just stack your toe to your heel, and you just go all the way up, and by the end of the day you're there. Then you're not the RTO anymore. You throw that rucksack off, and you're like, okay, I'm just a dude now. I don't have to do anything, and it's great. But that's what it is. Like that is what a lot of this is you want to say. I want to say that I hope for the day where I get to look back and see everything that's been done. But the reality of it is you have to just put 1 foot in front of the other. And I think this is where we go back to this idea of persistence, is that momentum is something that we build as a culture, and I think gun culture as a whole is actually building momentum. Yeah, we've had a hell of a year. We've had a lot of infighting. A lot of the battles that gun culture faced this summer were not the ones that everyone was expecting. It was just a lot of infighting, a lot of like issues where people did shady things, or character qualities came out, or whatever. People disappeared off the map. It doesn't matter. But it wasn't, it's like, but like that's where you build momentum. That's where you keep the faith. And then when we have a better season ahead of us, then that work that you've already done in the past becomes the advantage of the future. And that's one thing that I want to make sure that like anyone who listens to this show gets, that is that yes, the night is dark and full of terrors, but the darkest, it's always darkest before the dawn. And these are all phrases that people say to try to condense big inspirational concepts into little phrases. But if you
cliches because they work, and they wouldn't be cliches.
Yeah, I'm like, if you're thinking of quitting, don't. And if you really are convinced on quitting, quit tomorrow. Not today. Quit tomorrow. And if you're if you think that this community has hurt you so much that it's beyond repair, like, dude, give it another day. Give it another day. So
Look, on that phrase of quitting, I have this little phrase that I've coined. I call it destiny donuts. Okay, hear me out. Having a day, you're like, all right, that's it. I'm done eating like shit. It's over. I'm done being a fat piece of shit. I'm going into work the next day, and I'm starting new. You go to work, and you're there. And Linda, God damn it, Linda, she got those donuts from that place, and they're the nice ones. They're your favorite. They're always sold out. But today, she brought some into the office, and you're like, God damn it. And so in that moment, the Lord, the universe, and the devil are all sitting with their arms crossed, and they go, so what will you do? And that's what it is in that moment, those destiny donuts. How serious are you? Oh, you're done talking to your ex. She just texted you nudes. How serious are you? Oh, you think you're done gossiping? Well, your homie just hit you up. How serious are you? Right? Mm-hmm. So it's like in all these things, destiny donuts come into play. And I like my little silly coined phrase.
I honestly thought you were going to go a different direction with that. I was like, oh no, she's just, because like I'm sitting here thinking, is the donuts the reward for not quitting yesterday?
No,
it's the temptation.
And it is. And like, that's the beauty. Like I said, like whatever fucking devil angel on your shoulder and the in between, they're all asking, what will you do? And then
contraire.
that's when you have that. You're like, oh, what happens? And then you got to have some exercises and grace for yourself. And there's a difference between making oopsies and like never accepting accountability. Like there's a lot of people, man, they want all of like the accolade, but with none of the accountability or
Oh yeah,
responsibility. They
Plenty,
want the accolade. And it's like,
yeah.
on the back end, you get people who are like, yeah, I do this thing. It's like, it pains me when I see certain people. We know we all have that person. We see them post a story, whether it's the fucking chick who's like, oh my God, be good to people, you guys, be good to people. And I'm like, you just had like a 24 long message rant on someone because they voted for someone you didn't like, or like had the wrong pronouns in their fucking bio. And then you have, these guys who will say things like, yeah, you just gotta get out there, like do the thing, you gotta change. And you're like looking at them, looking at what they're talking about, looking back at them, being like, oh, really? And then there's people who follow that too, who are like, yeah, because what they're saying is good. And that's the hard part too. Sometimes you can get people who are shit people, but they say good things. It's like, well,
our ultimate goal is truth, not just something else, not some sort of semblance or false piety. So I'm reading this book right now, and you might have a fun time with this bit of a segue too, because it's actually connected. It's called The History of Warfare by John Keegan. And in the early sections of the book, he's wrestling with the difference, like the issues with von Clausewitz, which is on war. And you're going to be connected to this because you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about, how like gun culture and communities view different types of conflicts. But Karl von Clausewitz is this guy. Let's see if I can get it off my shelf without completely blowing out my screen. So Karl von Clausewitz is this guy who wrote this book called On War. And this is where we get a lot of what the West thinks about war. Really, it does. And war and conflict. And this is where we get the phrase of something like a war is politics by another means. And so he makes this sort of fundamental argument in On War that the predecessor, the important component that makes war is it's a conflict, particularly between states or nations or countries, right? And so much of how we think about culture in the gun community is actually riding this line between Clausewitz on one side and Mao on the other. And I got to read this line from this book because in context, it makes a lot of sense. The von Clausewitz style of war is very much so, we get ready for it, we have a decisive battle, and then everything's over. There's a beginning, we fight, we decide the winner, we end. And so he makes a statement on page 196. These two characteristics of their war-making style, he's referring to the Arabs in the Muslim Arabs in their early expanse. So these two characteristics of their war-making style, dependence on obstacles and readiness for flight, are typically primitive, as we have seen. They were those that so infuriated the Philhellenes, the brother Greeks, in their encounter with the Greeks during the War of Independence from Turkey. So this is kind of later Arab Empire time. If the Arabs were primitive warriors, why then were they so successful in their wars against the disciplined, organized armies of Byzantium and Persia, regular armies, as we would denote them in any system of military classification? We know that Persia and Byzantium exhausted each other in the long course of a long war. Nevertheless, it is the general rule that primitives lose to regulars over the long run. Harassment is an effective means of waging a defensive war, but wars are ultimately won by offensives, and the Arabs were certainly on the offense during the era of the conquests. The conclusion must be that it was Islam itself which lays so heavy on emphasis on the fight for the faith that made them so formidable on the field. Skipping ahead a little bit. Casting forward in time, this was Mao's perception also. His tactics were primitive to begin with, and he saw no indignity in retreat as long as his soldiers retained their belief in their eventual victory. And so this is kind of how this is how I've been thinking. This is why I've been talking about momentum so much. And it sounds like a segue that's gone off course, this is why I think it's so important for gun culture to look at this idea of momentum, our community to look at this idea of momentum and recognize that just because we have setbacks and difficulties doesn't mean we don't win in the long run. Because what we believe in is right and true and good, and we carry that forward through time. And some days and some generations are the generations that have to take the licks, and some generations are the ones that carry it forward in time. And so that's where I wanted to move in this subject of momentum, because you've got an event coming up here.
I
and
do.
and those two, I don't know if that segue is too aggressive and too hard, or if you think there's something to be salvaged there.
No, I think that to that point of momentum and stuff, like I've been planning for over a year now this event called Pew Peeps Expo, and it's the good peeps in gun culture. It's 2023. We are no longer the same America we were. A lot of us came from a very different era of the types of war that we see, and it's mostly online versus in person. How we carry our weapons and the meaning and morality behind those things has also shifted in some ways. You go to places like SHOT Show, and it's a bunch of military outdoorsmen, whatever. Well, hey, there's always going to be a place for that. But Pew Peeps is about, well, 2023, like it or not, the likelihood of you getting clapped by some guy in a maid costume and cat ears with a decked out fucking HK and like awesome Spiritus gear, no longer zero. That's where we're at. It's a different fucking world. Dude, I have a whole group of based, this is nuts, blew my mind, based fucking furries. You think it's going to be something like, there is a huge right wing, I'm going to say like, not even like right wing, just extremist furry community. Like there's somehow like ended up in some rabbit holes where there's like people arguing about certain furry groups, like being Nazis or whatever else. I'm like, this is crazy. But anyway, bunch of furries love guns, a lot of them. And they're in my art feed liking my shit. I'm like, holy fuck. This is a different day and age. So the more we try to, push away the narrative of firearms into these niche little areas, like, you have to be this, you have to be that. No, you fucking don't. You don't have to be anything. Guns are for everyone. And I mean fucking everyone. I mean that. Hands down. Straight up. I'll be like, oh, no, not this person. No, fuck that. You train people to work with you don't want to give it to them. No. Everything comes with education. If someone wants to fucking, off themselves, you ain't going to stop them. Someone wants to hurt someone else, you ain't going to stop them. Prohibition has never worked. So just to that, coming back to like the expo, the idea is to bring together a bunch of the people in the firearms industry who give a shit about it. So I have the unique pleasure and exposure of having some really awesome friends in this industry, people I consider very dear to me, like my and family. You guys know him as Grand Thumb. Mike and Ash, he and his wife are two of my most favorite people. I promise they are even more wholesome than they look on fucking Instagram. I'm like the adopted auntie of their kids. I love them so much. I just spent a week before last at his place, and then this last week I was actually staying with my good friends Cody and Brandon, and my friends and family are really integrated in this. They all really care a lot about.
Do you have the big hat? Doesn't the auntie have to have a big hat, like just an obscenely large hat? Like
I do have a couple fancy hats,
like Carmen Sandiego level hat. Like, oh, auntie's here.
Look, I'm the aunt in the tiger onesie with an AK. Okay, times have changed.
Look, I might be I might be a traditionalist, but I mean I still have my values. You can't take away my Carmen Sandiego.
You must have the derby hat or you are useless. No, you'll have to settle for a tiger onesie. Sorry, but yeah, no, it's been a really big, crazy battle as far as momentum goes, especially because in these situations, you can't afford to not trust people. And I've already been let down many times by big promises and zero delivery from people. A lot of people are excited when you're in the room, but when you leave, some people have different reasons or they get busy or whatever. Making yourself a priority, as awkward as that can feel, is really important. Being able to say, hey, no, you said you'd commit to this thing, and let's get this going, do the stuff. Yeah, okay, right on. But I've already, I've had some people who said, "Oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that." And then, crickets, or they'll be like, anything you need." And then you call on them and they're like, "Nothing." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Okay, that's cool."
Yeah, that is a rough place to be. Where
Yeah.
you're like, I needed you here.
Well, and it's the first show of something like this, and it is a risk anytime you're doing something new. But I think a lot of people talk about changing the industry or being a difference in it, and Brandon, if you guys don't know, Brandon Herrera is running for Congress in fucking Texas, and he's like, "Holy shit! Like I'm actually doing well, and that's kind of terrifying." And you get to that point where fucking he hates government, and he hates it so much he's going to try and change it. And I feel the same way about firearms culture. Like I hate the ignorance so much, and this is my effort to try and do something, and I'm going to do everything I fucking can to bring this to life, and I'm working very hard. And we can only do however much we can do, but I think a lot of people want to be a part of this, and I think a lot of people need this, and having an open to the public event where your favorite vendors and creators are there actually selling their own stuff and talking about their own things is a really great way to connect very directly with that and be even more integrated.
Cool. Well, hey, let's take a break.
I do. So the long short of it is you guys can check out pewpeeps.com. Passes are live. Registration is live. It is still open to vendors, including small creators. You don't have to be making gun parts. We're not going to be selling guns or ammunition at the show, but there are going to be a lot of cool guns on display, and for you to directly connect with some pretty big vendors. I've been talking to a lot of big names in the industry. Soon I'll be releasing, my vendor list as it comes out. Yeah, there we go. pewpeeps.com. And people can, like I said, come in as either a vendor, a guest. You can come, bring your cameras if you want, cruise around, take pictures, whatever. It's going to be a real good time.
Yep.
And this
So
takes-
San Antonio, Texas.
Yep.
Alrighty. So it is rolling. You got people on the list. Then you guys got a social media here, which is Pew Peeps on Instagram.
And on X. Instagram keeps, I think I have some people mass reporting it, and it's been really hard for me to make posts on that account, which is super annoying. But on X/Twitter, I'm using that to stay the most updated on things. So
We had a bit of an interesting weekend when it came to that. I was thinking about putting together an entire episode on it, but I didn't get to it so far. With it being Thanksgiving, I didn't want everyone to go into Thanksgiving weekend with more reasons to not look forward to talking to their cantankerous relatives or whatever it is your problem. Like I don't have to deal with that this year, which is said tongue in cheek. I'm sorry if my family's listening. I don't hate you. It's Thanksgiving.
sometimes it's just exhausting to do things like that too, though. Like,
Well, yeah, like let's just stop dancing around. Let's just stop dancing around the subject. Like you hate my way of living, and you act like I despise yours, and I'm not interested in that non-negotiation anymore. But
that
it
to your
is
family, they hate that.
not my immediate family. No,
Oh,
like I know people who are in this environment where Thanksgiving is like a hostage scenario where they're sitting there with not their immediate family, but like you go meet with the extended family, and there's this like obvious, palpable disdain that floats through the room, and you're like, and the thing about it is it's so weirdly lopsided. Oh God! Now you took me off the rails. I was going somewhere with this.
you took yourself off the rails, homie. We were talking about how the firearms industry was self-hating too in our little.
I blame
Yeah,
you
boy.
because it's easy. Just call me a chauvinist or something. I am only using chauvinism in the convenience of it. I was distracted by a woman. Let's throw her in the water. She's a witch.
Their witchy antics.
Mm-hmm. Witch anti witchy aunt. Yeah, okay, we're done with that. So this weekend, last Friday, if I'm not mistaken, a whole bunch of the culture of gun culture was hit by Instagram with these your content cannot be shared. And I put a thing out on Instagram about like, hey, if you got this post, send it to me because I want to build a pattern here. I want to not only like we know on a meta scale, which is a double entendre. It's both meta and meta. That they're not exactly in support of like gun culture at all. But also this time, I thought it was an interesting something that came out of this one, and this is the pattern that I'm starting to see. Meta or Instagram put something in their algorithm that specifically and somehow disproportionately went after veteran run organizations. If you were doing anything for veteran charity, if you were building anything for veteran mental health, if it had anything to do with like veteran support groups, whether it's like Eagles and Angels, or you run a podcast like Sean Ryan or this one, those were the things that were very, very unusually common. And so I've been tracking this for a while, and this is going to be an ongoing project. So if you're listening and you're on Instagram, when you get that pop-up that says some of your content may not be visible, document what it is, whether by taking a screenshot and send it to us in the DMs. Now I've got a bunch to go through right now, so I'm a little behind on it. But the point that I'm looking for is I'm looking for patterns, particularly because that information will be useful both from a journalistic sense, but also from a cultural sense, because I've seen people hit where, well, all of the things that they have to take down were firearms related. Okay, so go ahead.
I'm going to interject on this just a little bit because I have the unique ability to have special accounts and stuff that enable me to see things from the complete other side of the world, right? Mm-hmm. And it's amazing how many people complain in the liberal corners of the internet about how gun stuff isn't banned, how all their porn shit's taken down. Like, how can they have videos that are literally showing people getting murdered, but like I have a picture of me in fishnets and someone reports and it gets taken down, right? So the censorship isn't personal, but it's selective in nature, in the way that the algorithm needs both sides to fuel controversy, because controversy is what fucking sells. So how do you get people engaged on a platform? You let people fucking argue about it. It's why there's so many accounts like, well, this is banned, but that's not banned. Of course not, because it's not meant to vet it all out. If it actually, like, they have the technology to solve that problem. Like, that exists with all the AI that's there and everything else. That exists. Talking with people personally who've worked on those algorithms, being out in the Seattle area where like Facebook headquarters and shit like that exists, they have the ability to fix that, but they don't, because that algorithm of controversy feeds engagement. Instagram, Meta, is a dying platform as much as people don't want it to be. Facebook reached its cap. Instagram reached its cap. They are dying to things like China and TikTok and fucking X, because after Daddy Elon bought X, everyone's arguing on there. And that is selling everything. That's what's moving, is the controversy. Like, the reason TikTok's able to stand in the way that it does is because China's so fucking huge that it doesn't matter if it fails in America. It doesn't matter if it fails in America. Like, there's so many people who are using it.
No, it's not failing in America, though.
No, and I know it's not.
That's the issue. It doesn't matter whether or not. No, I'm actually going to add a layer to it. It doesn't matter whether or not it's an entirely subsidized platform. That's not the issue. The issue is the point that should be made is that it is not failing. Right? It is a very successful. I mean, I get it. You can subsidize a missile for so long before you have to deal with the consequences. Fine. Yeah. But the issue being said is, yeah, Twitter or Instagram, let's say Instagram, or I don't use Facebook at all, but Instagram is not a solid platform. It is not a reliable platform for people to build businesses on entirely. But it is the place that we are at right now. And it is an interesting argument to hear people say from, well, I can ban, you can post gun stuff, but you can't post, what is it, pornography or whatever. And the answer to that is simple. One is moral and the other one is not. Like the very straightforward answer is that one of them is enshrined in our Constitution, as well as bears a moral semblance to it. Because you can't tell me that publishing borderline pedophilic material is just a manner of expression to be contrasted against somebody talking about education using examples of violence.
No, I completely agree with you. Like, just so you're aware, like, I agree with you.
And
It's
and I get how there is controversy, but if you work at Meta and you're building, you should quit and find a new job. You should just literally remove yourself from the education pool and find something else that you're going to spend your life on. Hopefully it'll be less destructive to humankind.
The difference being, though, that, and as much as I do believe there's such a thing as universal right and wrongs, and there's moral and there's immoral. I think it was the head of the KGB who said this back in like the early fucking 90s. He said, once someone is morally compromised, there is no amount of information that you can give them to undo that. And this goes back to, you look at whether it's the child jihad or it's the, person who grew up their whole life selling their body because they believe that it was the right thing to do and that's what they were supposed to do. Pick your thing, right? But no matter what, we can't defeat that moral discrepancy by just like you were saying earlier, being angry about it or doing this thing. Like, we can do our best to track it and do all this shit, but we're fighting a literal machine. Like, a bunch of the things that people are arguing with are literally bots. AI is so fucking good. There's so many fake accounts that look real on purpose that people are using to simulate real conversation. Like a bunch of it's been proven time and time again, people stripping out accounts like, oh my God, I just had a 22 reply argument with a literal fucking bot on Reddit. Like, that was a thing back in I remember seeing that pop up around 2016 and shit, like proven that they were just like fake accounts. And so people are trying to fight. It's like, you're fighting a literal machine. How do you fight a literal machine? With actual community in person, by dispelling ignorance and doing those things. And it's frustrating, but it's I hate to say like it's fruitless sometimes doing that, but it's like fighting the algorithm is not something I think any group of man can do without just going Tyler Durden on some shit, No.
The objective is, and also the objective is not to fight the algorithm. You're not, the issue is that you're not going to be able to win in that sort of mentality. Like, it's not, well, if we can prove it enough, we have like a legal case. There may be some grounds for that, but there also is a responsibility to document this material. There is a responsibility for this information to be known, because your argument, the thing that you're bringing up from the KGB guy about once a person is morally compromised, there's no amount of information. The answer, this is great, because now you're playing in my pond, and that is when a person has decided, or when a person has engaged their worldview, built their worldview on this idea that there is no longer an objective reality. There is no, and I'm not talking about the books or the table or the fact that this is happening on the internet. I mean that there is no such thing as morality, that morality is purely relative or purely perspective. It's entirely subjective. Once you've convinced a person to believe that, and that is the anomaly, by the way, but once you've convinced a person to believe that, who casually says things like, well, perspective is reality, now you have a perfectly malleable person, because they have no rubric by which to make moral evaluations. And this is the point, is that you want to know what it means to be a slave in 2023, is that you wake up, you see a controversy, and you say, oh, morality is just relative. It's unfortunate. It's sad.
No, you have
adopted the mentality, the mindset, and you've built a worldview around something that is easily malleable and can be fired and forgotten like a missile. That is the first step. If you find yourself telling yourself that kind of information, this is where people get Yuri Bezmenov wrong, where Yuri Bezmenov was talking about the demoralization of the United States. I don't think he was talking about demoralization so clearly and cleanly as the idea of like making us sad, because if that was their goal, they've achieved it. The demoralization that they're talking about is the distancing of morality from the vernacular of the individual. And what happens when that this is what happens with people. It's so observable. It's interesting. You take a population, you cut away all the moorings, all their connections to anything, and so They don't have worldviews, they don't have values anymore. They replace those values with consumerism, and they're latching on to something, right? And then what you do is you can do this quite successfully, but it's so you take a population and you cut away their connection to morality. And you do that by repeating grievances over and over and over again. So much so that they start perceiving the worldview solely as the grievance is the only truth. And then once a person has given up on the concept of morality because you've broken their worldview of anything that has to do with like responsibility, actions, taking whatever it is, any sort of foundation, once you've broken that apart, the problem is that they don't remain a void. Now they are a malleable object where you can inject something into them. And once you inject that into them, it becomes their personality. They get radicalized, and then you can literally strap a bomb to their chest and have them blow up a school. They'll do it because it's what you're doing is you're taking a person and you're stripping them down of all of the intellectual and moral tools to understand the world. And so I see this in the context of gun culture. This is what it looks like: is you take a person who becomes exasperated. He becomes Michael Keaton from Falling Down, and he has gotten to a position where he has invested into something for so long that it doesn't pay off, and he just becomes tired, and he isolates, and he starts pulling himself in. And then you take that person and you become an FBI agent, and you start feeding him grievances until he has decided that he is going to become the literal hand of God and bring reckoning on the world, except for his God is Mammon and his name is destruction. And so you have the Russian argument that's being made here, and the way to win the war against the West was not just to try to challenge their military might, but was to engage in a long form cultural battle. The question that we have to face with is, where do we cut the dead flesh? Where do we cut the line? Because there are obvious cases of characters that fit over here in this worldview that they're the malicious bad guys, right? And they're the guys who are maybe playing the caricature of the dude informing in their, the world that their world is evil. Their names are easy: Ibram X. Kendi, Malcolm Nance, Neil deGrasse Tyson. I mean, these are the kind of people who are custom-made manufacturers of resentment towards the world. And one's a high priest, and one's a pseudoscientist, and one's like an intelligence theorist. But all three of them are built on the same worldview of destruction is God, government is God, and it must destroy. And so you take a person, you cut down all of their moral foundations where they can say, this is right, this is wrong, I must go here, I shouldn't do that. And now they feel like they're lost in a soup because all they have is grievances and sadness and destruction. And then you start feeding them that information. Now you've created a war. Now you've created the world that we live in. And it's so observable. It's so observable and so easy to understand. Well, not easy to understand. The challenge that it deals with, and the thing that's so hard about it, is what do you do with people who are stuck in that framework, where they're in that cynical thing? They're starting to say there is no such thing as objectivity. They're starting to live in that worldview of destruction is their only way out, and this is where you get suicide, and this is where you get the school shooter. And so it's like we're creating this environment for ourselves. We are literally producing it in a factory. It's ridiculous.
Well, I don't know, to your, I guess, question of like, oh, how do you get someone out of that? Like, yeah, we're manufacturing it. It comes down to, look, these manufactured things, whether that's the habitat you grew up in or the social media that you're connected to, that hive mind of shitty information that's manipulating you might not be your fault, but it's still your responsibility, right? Your habitat may not be your fault, but it's still your responsibility. I think that it's easy to get lost in the observance of something, like how people can fathom one death, but it's hard to even picture 100. Suddenly, like we lose empathy with that. I think the same thing happens sometimes from a philosophical standpoint, going back to what we were talking about earlier about, like take any group of people like who stick enough to the same thing, and you get a change, right? Or like the Taliban are using an example of like, oh, they have one moral congruency, they have one thing, they can change it.
They believed in something. They believed in something.
Yes. So I think in these situations where we have all of these people who are isolated, the answer is just like, yeah, touch grass, have community, and empty your balls. Like you gotta have those things to recalibrate yourself. These people who are really alone and gobbling up information, like, I think we can read all the books in the world, we can scroll all the social media in the world, but in order to live, we have to adapt to something, or adopt something, some sort of ideal. Like, people are starving for religion, even if they don't realize that, whether that religion is God centric or not, or the government is your God, right? Or the internet is your God. Humans crave organized religion so much that they'll give it different names and fight for it under different titles, thinking that it's something different, and it's fucking not. It's not.
There is an observation through time that is the anomaly of the modern, or our contemporary world, is this idea that a person can say that they're non-religious. And this is going to sound, I think to the avowed atheist, this might sound like an attack against them, but it's not. It's actually an invitation. And it's the anomaly in human history would be the idea that a person is not religious. Is that they don't have any sort of religious foundation. And the issue with that is the only people that we call non-religious, we should appropriately refer to as non-religious, are psychopathics. In other words, there's something in them that is broken, that is disconnected from that part of their being. Yeah. And so religion is not a symbol or a cross or an organization. It's not a crescent and a star. It is not Islam. Religion, theology, religion. The word religion is not an organized, systematic code of people. Religion is the thing that a person uses to organize their morality. What is the rubric by which you make your decisions? Where do you draw your questions of right and wrong from? And then that's why I was saying, that's why I went back to that issue with the Russian thing, was because if you can convince a person that their mind is a contradiction, that there is right and wrong, but there is no right and wrong, then you can mold them into anything, because you have convinced them to build their life on a contradiction. So something can be true and not true at the same time. So religion is simply the thing by which you organize your morality.
Well, a little bit ago, you had said, people who believe reality is, perception, right? Mm-hmm. I think there's another side of that coin, which is reality is perception and denial. And denial holds arguably greater power than real perception or understanding. Denial is something that can be so deeply rooted in fucking traumas and upbringing and whatever, that in and of itself cripples the opportunity for perception, for someone to be actually malleable. Like, I think if someone isn't so founded in their denial of things, that they can be perhaps coaxed or changed or otherwise shaped. But I don't know. Just to that point, I think that denial is sometimes much stronger.
Yeah, you're on a good point there, is that denial is a part of perception, but it's still absolutely necessary to make a distinction, a hard line between what person perceives and what is real. You have to make, because it's the simple thing. I can believe that I have a basement. My house does not have a basement. It doesn't make a basement be.
Well, to that point, though, we talked about earlier how I perceive myself doesn't exist. How you see me is an image of me. How all my followers see me in the little snippets, they have some form of perception and then connection through their own means to me. Some of these things might overlap on a Venn diagram or a scatter plot of, Paigeosity is generally these things or also these things or whatever. But every single person that I meet and interact with for all of my life will have a different feeling and association with who I am. And there are those who can even know me very closely or very intimately in different ways and will still have a totally different perception of who I am. Yes, there are congruencies, and maybe like that idea of reality is like, oh, these are the things that are real. Like, she is a woman, she is this height, she is these things. But with the exception of physicality, everything else can become arbitrary and has to be agreed upon to some extent. For people, you can have a room of 20 people who say, or we'll say 10 for the sake of statistics, right? 10 people, and you have 5 who say, oh, yeah, she's generally really positive. And then you have 5 people that I knew maybe in a bad time in my life who are like, ah, nah, she was a total fucking cunt. Are you kidding? And you might have 5 people who are like, oh, wow, she was really patient and kind with me. Someone else saying, oh, no, she had a hell of a fucking temper. These things are all true. They're all things that have happened, and their perceptions aren't any less of me in those moments in time. But even though there's generally agreed upon things, the things that are facts are, yeah, she's a woman. She was born in this place. She did those things. So I think those are sort of I'd like to say inarguable, like even in like the transgender element, stuff like that. But that's that line of acceptable mental illness and stuff that has crept over now too, where people believe that they are something so much that they're changing it, or they're convinced of those things so that they change it. A child growing up to, there's no such thing as a 4-year-old fucking trans kid. They're like, oh, I have these things. Like, oh yeah, we'll start giving you hormones at 4. Like, that kid at 4 years old being given the other thing is being convinced of something else. Their reality is now being completely changed and shaped chemically and physically for them to buy into a lie that is impossible to achieve because they were born with different things. It's telling someone born with no legs that they can just get up out of a chair and walk. It's not right.
You're
But
not you're not Jesus, bro. You're not like,
yeah, no.
take up your mat and walk, and you're like, what?
I
You're
just
like,
think that's an important thing to notice, though, that like with the exception of irrefutable physical thing, I say irrefutable now, even that's in theory on a fucking spectrum. Say in theory, right? It's like it's become a spectrum because so many people buy into that. And like, while I think there might be like a very small percentage of those people who actually truly believe and perceive those things to be true versus those who just deny anything else outside of them. They'd be like, no, what you're saying can't be true, so this must be, versus the other way. You can't say that that's a fucking woman. You can't say that trans women can't have children. Like, okay, that denial is
yeah. I mean, you
denial.
can. Sorry, I'm supposed to cough out of the microphone. Not right. I literally looked right into it and went, ah! So this is the job. This is the role of the philosopher. This is the role of the person, of the individual. Is that no? While we may all have different perspectives of what the truth is and what reality is, we still are either in pursuit of it or in the pursuit of its destruction. And sometimes you can be an amalgamation at times. You can be in a division, or you can be in a conflict with it. But this is the issue that we're talking about here too. It doesn't matter how many people tell you that the earth is flat. It's not flat. It literally doesn't matter. The issue is that you're dealing with is a cultural problem. So the issue being presented needs to be parsed properly. In other words, we're not having a debate on whether or not the earth is flat or round. We're having a conversation on what is it in our culture that leads people to describe things as being flat that are not flat. Are they all blind? Are they literally all blind? Like you can't perceive the concept of gravity, like whatever. And so there is an issue there. And I think what you have, or not I think, but what you have going on in this case is actually pretty clear. You have people who want to see themselves as God, and they want you to worship them. And they want to have the power of God, and they want to say, I get to dictate reality. Buddy, that's not your role in the chain. That is not your place in this world. And so that issue that we see, like, and the question that we are engaging in a culture, because we have objective reality over here, and then we have subjectivity as of a person over here. The question that culture deals with is how do we place that together in a community? Because we recognize that mankind, let's just say, truth is a circle, is an objective center, and mankind exists in orbit around that. And as a result, all of these people have different perspectives. Community only functions when that orb is oriented, or when that halo is collectively oriented inwards. If they're all shooting in random directions and they're all pointing themselves and they're all dictating different things, yeah, sure. This goes back to even what's the word? That metaphor of the blind men and the elephant. Is the blind men and the elephant metaphor is a really good trap. It's a really good trap. It's not a true statement. It's a good trap. 3 blind men touch an elephant. One touches his trunk and says it's a snake. One touches a foot and says it's a tree. One touches an ear and says it's a leaf. And so they are all describing something different. Problem is, it's an elephant, dude. We all know it's an elephant. You said so at the beginning. They're all blind, deaf, and dumb. They're just wrong. And so where community is built is where those 3 blind men start to come together and try to figure out what that thing in the middle is. If they're going to sit over here and complain, like they're gonna sit like, well, and they're gonna get into long-winded arguments about the thickness of the leg, making it certainly to be a tree versus the bendiness of the like, that's foolishness, because that and that's what we're promoting in this mentality when we think, oh, well, perception is reality. Wrong. Multiple people have perspectives, and all of those things are supposed to either point towards or try to point towards the truth. And community's responsibility is to take those who have no intention at identifying the truth and cast them out. You're not a part of the community anymore. You are not in pursuit of the truth. You do not believe in the values of human life. And that's where I think we're at right now.
Well, and that goes back to a community, a high trust society is a morally congruent society.
Mm-hmm.
So in order for you to have a community that functions, like, oh, how do you get these communities to, these people to believe these things? The answer is you don't. And that's why we've had religious wars since we've existed as human beings. Or that's political.
All wars are religious wars. There's no.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like that's, whatever flavor it is, like that's the rub is, oh, we believe this, we believe that. And to like your flat earther statement and be like, oh, what are they, fucking blind? It's like, well, how do some of those people prove it? I for what it's worth, I accept from literature and science and all of these things that the earth is round. Have I ever been high enough in the air to observe the planet? No. And you know what else said all of these things too? A bunch of scientists have also told me that I need to get a COVID vaccine and all the things that are with that. And I had I had the really unique privilege of having some friends who are literally in that field give me other good information during that time, which helped guide my decisions, which not everyone had access to. But that also goes down to like, I'm still choosing which labeled science I fucking believe in. So like, I deny that these people are like, oh, the earth is flat. I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense to me because, gravity, because this and because that. But like, holy shit, I'm not a fucking physicist either. I don't have a goddamn degree in that. Like I did, I got good grades through calculus and algebra 2 and all that. And I learned how to do chemical equations for things. But to even pretend that I fathom like that depth of mathematical understanding is insane. I, in theory, trust other people's theories that they're right. And I don't have any observable way of proving that. I just have to accept who it is that I'm going to accept the truth from and stick to that. And even then, I'm still, like I said, cherry picking fucking scientists. Like, who do I believe to be a credible person? Who do I not? Just because someone is credible, does that mean everything they say isn't credible? Like, what is it that they are doing? So that goes back to, at least for me, I come back to a lot the method of, the disproving the thing. You hear the conspiracy theory, you're like, let's disprove that. And sometimes you just fucking can't. Your disproof comes, well, I deny that to be objectively like untrue. Like I can't, or I deny that to be true. Like there's no way that can exist. So going back to the perception is, denial and reality, like the flat earther, they can't actually fucking prove that. Get someone in a goddamn spaceship to go look and they go, oh shit, I had my mind changed. And that's, the prisoner who goes to Christ, who goes, no, I found God while I was in this dark place. Or, see people who jump ship, or someone who is never Mormon becomes Mormon, or someone who is Mormon escaped their cult and had terrible things that happen. Like, who's right?
We all work. We all put effort into it. We're all here.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we don't all put effort into it. Maybe that's
no. I think a lot of people don't put in effort. That's like where, listening to the celebrities, you pick the thing that you emotionally connect with, and then listen to their opinions to guide it for you. Like, oh, that's the thing that's going to guide my decision. I like how that decision makes me feel because I like that person. So that happens a lot.
I would, yeah, nope. I think it's simply I am more afraid of being thought as the outsider, and I think honestly, we give people a lot of credit for thinking that they're what's it for fear, like a semblance of fear. Like, okay, like people are afraid of being the outsider, so they're going to go along with the group mentality. There's a certain element of that is true. There's also a certain empowerment to being a part of the to being in the cult or being a part of the cudgel. Is that um, you know the words to call to get people to fight on your behalf, and you know how to do it. You kind of in the most, not gracious sense, but in the kindest way of saying it, people have your back. You're just all going to hell together, and it's an interesting. That's not the right way of phrasing it, though. It's an interesting way of saying it. I think some people we oftentimes view cult-like activities as sort of simplistic and rudimentary, which is not the right way to do it. It's not like people join a cult or get involved in a cult because they look at it and they think of it as an intellectually plausible outcome. It's because it's fulfilling a need that the world around them is not, and most oftentimes that need is a sense of community. And so,
Let me, on your note of cult, like let me, like I know we think like in the religious fashion, all of that too, but
mhm.
I'm gonna throw you a weird one for like what I'm gonna call maybe a level of cult behavior in some ways. People will retreat to these spaces because they're given sanctuary or they're given safety and familiarity. People need routines. We need that. Even if our routine is our depression cycles, our routine is our disroutine, if our routine is our anxiety, humans are really, 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 really naturally neurotypical. And there are not many ways to correct that, or like, I say correct it, to overcorrect for it and change it without the use of, drugs and very mindful practice or whatever else. Like we're just very neurotypical that way. I know a couple instances, particularly of women who were uh, sexually abused in really extreme ways in their early life. These women that I know found groups of men, friend circles, that they have effectively bounced around the whole circle. And people are like,
Mhm.
how the fuck can you have, oh, what, you're dating this slut or whatever. And for them, they don't have to go outside that circle, because even with all the chastising and the perhaps gossip or whatever, they don't have to leave that space because they know that space and they know those things, so they still stay within it, and the guys there are getting their benefit of that trade, if you will, of having someone in their space that they can kind of have access to when they want to. But I think Colt, not just in the hooded child sacrifice shit that the new world order probably partakes in, but in the way that people find a place where they can go to that gives them the space to not have to think about things either, to be like, oh, you're safe here and you can just be here, and they just get told what to do because it's really fucking hard to think for yourself. Just chewing
is
on that.
is that an is ought fallacy problem? Like this is the point too, where you have to be pretty specific. Uh you can describe to me why a person does a certain thing, but that doesn't mean you'd be justifying it. So I can explain to you how, say, like my grandfather became a rather racist individual. It doesn't mean I justify it.
Oh yeah, no, I don't believe in. Again, you're still accountable for the behavior.
Hmm.
Like you're still accountable for it. I guess like understanding the whys is understanding that sometimes there's certain things that it's just like, yeah, I mean it's that way. Like they're still accountable for that behavior, and it just makes sense to me why it exists, and it makes more sense why it's never going to stop existing, and it makes even more sense of why it's an infinite stream of that's just going to be an eternal battle against those things. Like it's always going to exist.
Yeah, no, it will always exist. These kind of issues will be around forever. Like until the world ends, we will have human problems. I think that is a lie. There's a not a there's baked in that a lie that many people have been taught. And that is on the one hand it's a utopian lie, and on the other hand it's the sort of Clausewitzian final battle lie. And the lie is something like this: is that um, you can be that evil will be done with and gotten rid of, whether you describe evil as tyranny or whether you describe evil as inequity in populations. That will persist throughout mankind ad infinitum. That does not mean that, well, not ad infinitum, but until the end of time. That does not mean that we as individuals are given carte blanche permission, per se, to carte blanche permission to engage or further that issue, that evil. Like mankind there will always be a thief. There will always be a thief amongst mankind. You cannot get rid of thieving. But that does not mean that just because somebody else steals, so should you. Or you could insert some example: murder, violence, culture, degradation of society. Pick your evil. Like there will be evil in the world. You will not get rid of it, but we will strive to work against it as long as we can.
As long as we build good community with people who share our moral values, can we come together to make great strides and make things happen?
I think that's just it's more like that is the responsibility. Like that
No,
is
it
what
absolutely is.
it's like. It's not the solution. The solution is not that good community beats bad community. The responsibility of existence is the participation in community and building it up. This is one of the reasons why we get so angry at like the preppers who are like, I'm going to go live in my bunker in the woods. And you're like, what are you going to do? Wait for everybody else to build community? Like, thanks, dude.
You know what's funny about that? So, Mr. Mason, he runs Darcy. He's that guy. He came out and did a talk on his did a lecture for Tusk. Usually, Tusk is his tactical urban sustainment course. He does it out in the Arkansas fucking bayou where you learn how to make water out of mud, and you got OP4 chasing you down for 4 days in the hell. So it's like, yeah, 4 days is long enough that you probably won't die of like, dehydration or whatever. So they have you, 4 days just in the absolute fucking suck, getting eaten by mosquitoes, dodging gators and copperheads and what have you all throughout in the Arkansas heat. And he's seen some shit. He was, when he came up and gave his lecture on it, he was talking about, after Hurricane Katrina, like they were wading through, bodies in the water, trying to, snuff out warlords who were quickly taking to destroying shit. But he says, water is king and community is queen, because all this lone wolf shit ain't gonna fucking fly. We all got assets and liabilities. If you're rolling alone, you're either gonna end up enslaved, dead, or both, in that order. Like, you have to do shit. Jeremiah Johnson, you're gonna homestead? That's great. What do you do when we're burning to the coast and there's no one to stop it because all the power grids went out nationwide? Now 90% of the population is dead, which is real statistics within like fucking 3 months. He goes, yeah, you need an average of 5 gallons of water a day. You need way more people than you think you do. Like, that shit blew my mind. Even just looking on paper, he's like, cool, let's take a look at your neighborhood. All right, pick a spot, any spot. How many people do you think you need to secure that? You're like, oh, all right, we could probably comfortably secure like this spot or that spot with 4 people. He's like, okay, cool. You need 4 people to man those slots. If you want them on shifts that aren't 24/7 a day, you need to be having 8-hour shifts for people, which means you need 3 people for each shift, which now that means you need 12 people for just security. Now, who's running sanitation? Who's making sure the shit goes down the right side of the hill? Who's making sure that your food's getting clean? Who's washing clothes so you guys don't get rashes and infections like staph that you can't prevent because you don't have antibiotics? Who's making water? And you're like,
Yep.
oh my God. Suddenly he goes, yeah, suddenly you need a lot of fucking people. Community is everything.
and I return to my original point. The issue that we have with the idea of the lone wolf person is not the realism or lack thereof of their of what they may or may not be trying to accomplish. The issue that we have with them is that they're a bad person. That is a bad position to hold. It's just like, oh, you're going to do it all alone. Like, Yeah, that's fine. Then like, why do you have to tell anybody? Why don't you just get started now? Like,
Yeah,
why don't
that
you
why
just
do you have to fucking tell anybody? No
yeah.
one gives a shit. If you're gonna do that, fine, fuck off. Like
Like,
then you just
cool.
do that.
Hey, can you send like again, send us a 10-digit grid. Thanks. So like when it's all going to hell, we're just when it all goes to hell, we'll come to you for support, right? Yep, yeah. Exactly. Because no, come on, dude. The issue it's like one of those weird contradictions in people where they have to
It's masturbatory. It really is. When you have people who sit there and they want to do it, it
ooh.
goes back to what we were talking about, the person who feels like the lonely person, the outsider. There's actually kind of a fine line between that mentality of being like, "Oh, I feel alone." You're not alone. That's an illusion of being alone. It's a way to make yourself the center of fucking attention. And people do that. And you're like, "No, it's like you're not alone, you're not special. You're not fucking special." Which is good news because it means that your struggles are solvable and you can find ways around them because there's been billions of people who've practiced before you and billions of more who will come after you who've like made solutions to those problems. Like that's good news. We're special in the way that we interact with each other, and our love is special and our emotions are special, and they should be because that connection is personal. But yeah, that lone wolf shit, fucking gay and retarded.
Oh, you got to swing in all sides of the fence at that one. Uh that's not that swing at all sides of the fence. Oh, yeah. Okay. Let's
Sorry, I got you demonetized. You'll just have to bleep it out. My bad.
I don't know if it is going to be demonetized, and to be honest, I'm going to make like 17 cents off of this video because you like we just hit monetization. So we've got enough people where YouTube's like, "Yay, you can have a little bit of money," and then they pay us. I mean, I guess I could even look at it over here. I think I've made a total of. Let's go to analytics. I on YouTube through the hundreds of thousands of views, we have made $20.76.
And that's a based 20 fucking dollars. Good
That
job.
that is net. That is the entirety of what the redacted YouTube channel has made.
Here's what we were talking about words the other day, and like I don't care what I say. Like someone, people be freaking out about, I'll abstain from hard R's on your channel out of politeness. But it's like, people's like those words only have weight if you care about putting weight behind them, which I don't. Like it's just like, no, I'm just gonna use it as it's just integrated obscenity because it's funny and it's whatever. And like you just get over it. You're sitting there being like, oh my God, I can't believe you said this thing. You're so whatever. I'm like, wow, it's so crazy that you think that's racist because I have zero stake in that word. I have no fucking care. And neither do the people I roll with. It's kind of my like vetting system at this point. If I just can't say what I want, I'm like, we can't be friends. Like we can't be real friends. Cause it's like I don't if I have to sit there and constantly prove like how not racist, how not hateful I am, like, God, fuck, I got so many goddamn gay family members and literally retarded best friends and people in my family are like, no, you just
It's you bring up an interesting subject too, because it isn't really about the thing that it is like, oh, it's not really about not being racist or whatever it is. It's really quite a different story. And that different story I found really interesting is in what people when they are looking for when they're doing that is that they're not looking to see whether or not you fit within their moral standpoint. They're looking for you to pay fealty to them. My
yeah, it's
wife,
controlling the narrative, going
yeah,
back to the controlling of reality.
it's not entirely controlling the narrative. It's manipulating you. And so I like my wife had had an interesting situation once where somebody that she knew who she did not consider a friend, but who apparently thought that they were friends, um, had decided that something bad had happened, and so in order for my wife to earn her good graces and be considered a friend again, my wife had to do community service for a cult, and it was like for like an LGBTQ kind of cult thing, and it was hilarious. It was because she didn't do it. It was like, oh well, you made it easy. We're not friends. Don't talk to me. Like I don't have to pay fealty to you.
Yeah, get fucked.
And it was just the funniest thing too, but that's what that is. Like that's what that mentality is like, oh, you need to prove that you're not racist. Like when somebody says that to you, just remember what they're doing. They are a man in a loincloth with a spear saying, unga bunga, give me your stuff.
Well, it's
Like they're
also,
It's
Like
basic tribalistic colonialism, or whatever you want to use the term for. It's just literally piracy. Like, I want you to give me your stuff because I think you're a bad person. Like, cool, there's the door.
we talked about that, I think, in the last podcast round about like multiculturalism and stuff. People like being like, "Oh, you can't say." I'm like, "I'm fucking everything, dog." Like, what do you? Yeah, whatever. I said Mexican, Irish, Native. Then who else knows whatever the fuck else down the bloodline? Like,
Yeah, well,
you know.
multiculturalism is just a crashed ship anyway.
Hey, you know what? I think this is all the things people talk about, all this shit on a spectrum, like, oh, gender on a spectrum, whatever. No, you know what? The only thing that is actually on a spectrum is our race, like who we are as people. Because you can ask someone, what are you? And they can honestly say, I don't know. Or like I have friends who are Mexican American who live very traditional Mexican lives in their home, live with their families later, like marry later. But in the outside world, they're American in the way that they integrate in schools and with their friends. It's actually very different. Like, and what is on a spectrum is quite literally our race. You can have someone who identifies as multiple things and participates in those multiple cultures being from that lineage. Like an Indian American is very much the same that way, or whatever. Like that is the real spectrum.
You know a person's an advocate for the cult of multiculturalism when they follow that up with, and then you're culturally appropriating something or another. It's like, I thought we were multicultural here. We're not.
Hey, you're culturally appropriating, suck my dick. Because you know what? Like, I'm part Mexican and I can't wear a goddamn sombrero. So I'm like, no, fuck you. I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want. If I don't wear goddamn turquoise earrings like my Yaqui Indian, guess what? I'll fucking do that too. I don't need to go get my goddamn papers to prove to you anything.
We talked about this. You don't get to wear a sombrero. You have to wear a big hat. You have to wear a Carmen Sandiego big red hat because you're auntie now.
You just have a fetish for mystery women in red. That's all it is.
Mystery women in red?
She's like a mystery red woman. That's Carmen Sandiego is sexy as fuck. I don't care who you are.
Would you? I guess you can't really blame somebody for that.
No, I know. She just comes up and she's like, "Ooh, find me, boy," and like takes off. You're like, oh my. Like, I don't know. I'd watch that porno. 10 out of 10. Let's go.
I'll have to talk to my wife. You're turning this into something I don't want it to be.
It's too late. We're on this ride. Momentum. Oh, no. We're talking about momentum. This is how we build momentum.
You got me. All right, so let's tie some things over and let's kind of wrap this Thanksgiving edition up. And I want you to give me 3 things you're thankful for, and then I'll give you mine, and then we'll talk a little bit more about what's going on with Pew Peeps, and then we'll close it off. Because one of the things that I it's a practice that has been very difficult to keep up, but it's like a discipline thing. Is that when I say keep up, like, dude, I am the worst at it. I have journals and I have writing and I have all this other kind of stuff, and you only and the audience only gets to see a certain what I show you, and that's okay because that's what this is for. But there is a certain element of, like, when I'm finding myself in that pit of despair, I start looking at I try to be reminded. Somebody usually reminds me, or I try to figure, like, okay, then what am I actually thankful for? Whether it's financial woes or just cultural loneliness, whatever the issue is like, what am I actually genuinely thankful for? And for all the stuff that we talk about as a community, for good things and for negative criticisms, like, we never even really, we kind of talked around the subject on how there's a unique element of gun culture that it just takes hating itself for granted. What are 3 things you're thankful for? And they don't have to be related to this topic. And you can do one and I'll do one, or whatever works best for you.
I think mine's kind of all encapsulating because I've had, to your point of pit of despair, I've had a lot of some crazy shit. And I'm thankful that I've gotten what I've prayed for my whole life, which has been, I've always prayed for wisdom, for courage and strength. And so I'm thankful for my suffering so that I can learn. I'm thankful for my moments of weakness so that I can persevere and find that strength. And I'm thankful for the moments in my life that I've been faced with tremendous fear so that I could work through them to find real courage. And those 3 elements in my life have enabled me to know how to be wrong and accept things, new knowledge and stuff from others, and have enabled me to grow my awesome community in my immediate life and outside of it, which only greatly increases my own value in life, and I feel as a human being.
I think mine are a little bit more down to earth, which is inverse because I'm supposed to be the philosopher and everything's supposed to be highfalutin. But
Doesn't have to be anything. You be anything.
so those three things again are you're thankful that you've gotten the things that you prayed for. As in, is this one item or is this three? Because you talked about three separate parts. Like you talked about that you had hardship so you could be humbled. You had wisdom so you could navigate through things and achieve. And then there's a third one was
Wisdom, strength, and courage. So
yeah
I
what
guess like those are my three things that like I've focused on a lot in my life. They get tested a lot, but I guess I'm grateful for those lessons because it makes all the harder lessons that keep coming easier to work through.
I know this is not meant to be like a dig, but aren't those the 3 points of the Triforce from Legend of Zelda?
I don't actually know.
Wisdom. Oh, you never played Legend of Zelda? You never
No,
played
I've played the shit out of it, but I don't know. I guess I say I've played Ocarina of Time and
Yep.
fucking the Breath of the Wild, but like no, I actually didn't know
Very
that.
very classically Ganondorf steals the Triforce of Power. He steals one segment. It is later revealed that Link, the main character, is the inheritor of the Triforce of Courage, and the Princess Zelda is the one who acquired or inherited the Triforce of Wisdom, and so it's wisdom, strength,
Oh,
and courage.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Here we
No,
are.
I wouldn't describe myself as a huge Legend of Zelda nerd, but when I was a kid, that was like the one video game that I like. Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time was the first video game that I played where I was like, I like this. Like, I like this game. I like this idea of this game, like the story, whatever. And I was young, but we're
It's a great
moving on.
game.
It's fantastic. I grew up in that era. I weep for children who will never be able to who have to grow up with like Breath of the Wild and never get to grow up in like the wonder of Ocarina of Time. But that was a wholly different world. So yeah, three things that I'm thankful for right now. One of them is I'm actually thankful that I live in this time, this day and age, where I get to sit here and I get to talk to people. Like I'm thankful for where I'm at in the world. As much as there are things that I want and there are places that I want to be, I'm thankful that I get to sit here and I get to talk to you. I get to exist within gun culture that it is held that Redacted is held together this long. And so like that's something that I'm genuinely thankful for. If I had been born in a different time, I'd have to be a dude wearing a robe standing on a bucket crying in the town center. And that sucks. So
Squad have been burned alive. We're good.
yeah, well, I who knows where I'd have been that one too. And then I think a second one that I'm thankful for is it's very genuine, but I am thankful for my family. My family has been good to me. They've been kind, but it's also like my wife is enduring. She's allowed me to continue on in this project this long. And saying allowed is not really the right phrase. Is that she's seen me go through like the highs and lows of it, and we continue to move forward.
She's a good woman.
She's been wonderful. And so yes, I am married. So all the single ladies, I will hit you with a stick, not the one you want. And then geez, the third one that I'm thankful for, I think honestly where I'm now, and this is going to be again a little bit cultural and meta narrative story, but I'm thankful that I am alive at this phase of gun culture, that I wasn't coming into my like adulthood in the 90s, because I know who I am. I tend to be focused on cerebral concepts and philosophy and like how do we really think about this. And if you had tried to market that in 1992, you would have been dead in the water. No one would have touched you, and so or touched me or whatever. So like two of them are time related. Like I'm thankful that I'm here now, in general, but I'm also thankful that I'm like at this phase in gun culture. I'm really thankful for the community because I've actually seen the good side of it. I've seen a lot where people like reach out to me, they reach out to somebody else, or like they're either hurting or not. Maybe not. It's not even a negative thing, and they reach out to you or they reach out to this community. Like I have seen the good side of this community, and I'm very glad. I'm very glad to be a part of it right now. I've seen plenty of shit, but it is not the absolute. So cool. Well, in closing on community, I'm actually going to bring this up. I've got your for those who are watching or listening on the podcast side and not on the YouTube side. We've got Paige's shop and her website up here. Paige, tell everybody a little bit about what you do and what keeps the lights on in your house, and then also this Pew Peep show. What's the one more thing about it?
Well, the meat of my work is making artwork. I love to make stuff. Nothing makes me more excited and happy than to share things that make other people excited and happy. So you can support me by going directly to my shop at shop.paigeosity.com, or go to paigeosity.com and click the shop button. My commissions have been closed since 2021. I'm sorry, people who are asking me all the time. But on my shop, I draw a lot of stuff all over. I have some fine art things I keep in my prints and whatnot as well. My roots are in that, but there's a lot of silly shenanigans, a lot of anti-government. Fuck the government. So you can browse that, check out cool stuff, and get neat stickers and shirts and things that say like ATF is poo-poo.
Yes.
6 foot tall in spirit. I have a shirt I'm dropping soon that just says I'm trying.
6 foot tall. 6 foot tall in spirit. I'm trying.
Yeah, just one that says I'm trying. So I'm gonna make that.
That's good. You that's a good one.
I also had taken a pause for a little while. I do a lot of streaming. Last few months I've been really focused on my expo, but I will be back in streaming as well here pretty soon. I now will have access every Monday to a private range indoors that I will be doing range day streams from, which will be really exciting. And then I'll get to pick back up with my art some days, range days the other, and I think it'll be a really good time. So follow me on kick.com/Paigeosity. Twitch is pretty cucked, so I kind of moved away from it. But no harm to the people who are out there who are still doing it. Looks like Twitch is trying now. There's some competition, which is kind of nice.
Yeah. Well, social media is not going to stay stagnant, and it's like anything that we learned. If you try to sit and hold your ground, you'll lose. You just can't. There's no stagnancy. It's not only relevancy. It's that there's you see this in philosophy too. Is that as soon as something becomes dead, and I mean dead as in like it's no longer engaged in, then it goes away. Like it just starts falling apart. Like that's why you can't build your entire moral philosophy on Immanuel Kant or Nietzsche or anything like that. Like it's as soon as you find somebody going, well, Anselm said it, so we're done, then they've ceased to end. So it's a good thing. Well, we've got you up here on the YouTubes. Paige, it's been a great time. I'm looking forward to your Pew Peeps show. I know that. Let's see if I can even bring this up without crashing the internet. I gotta move.
Pewpeeps.com, the good peeps in gun culture.
There you go. Pewpeeps.com. There you go. So the good peeps in gun culture. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to try to be there. I think we have every reason to it. Let's see. What was what time is it? When is it happening? April
19th through 21st.
Okay, so April 19th through the 21st. And then on here, registration, we got boom. Okay, so registration's available. You got some of the lineup and the main people that are going to be there. Exciting. Well, Paige, let's close off. It's been great having you on the show. I've really enjoyed our conversation. I think this is the first time where we started getting into a subject where I didn't know where it was like. I'm not saying I didn't know where it was going to go. I was like, oh no, are we going to have some friction? But no, it turned out really well.
Hey, I think, a good friction makes for, good debates are cool. I thought
you were going to make this into a sex joke. Like good friction makes for good sex. And you're like,
look where he goes. Here's the deplorable one. I'm the one drawing anime titties and he can't get his mind out of the gutter.
Well, I work from home. I work from home. So,
the of man.
Yeah, right. So cool. All right, Paige, it's been a pleasure. For those who are still watching and you want to support us, we have two main methods where you can do so. One of them is you can jump in and head over to redactedllc.com. I can even try to bring that up now. But you can head over to redactedllc.com, and for the next like 20 or so orders are going to get a free bag of gummy bears.
What does that mean? What's in them? Are they just gummy bears?
We found these gummy bears at this like really strange shop that they're not weed. They don't have anything in them. But they are actually gummy bears. Like, but they
sound surreptitious in nature. So it's
they have like a very good flavor. They're all one flavor too, because they're gold. They're like, oh, wow, I've not seen these before. The other reason why is because I'm doing a Notice Me Senpai to what's his name? Sean Ryan. Like the
I don't
guy's
even know
doing.
the name of your own senpai right off the bat. That's wild.
Well, it's uncomfortable. It's just a joke, but the point in that one is I wanted to do something for Black Friday, and right now most of what we have on the shop is already on sale, and so I was like, you know what, we'll add some little gift bags to it because they're good. We found them. They're legal. You're not going to have to worry about a drug test afterwards. They just have a really good flavor.
I feel like you're qualifying it so much that someone's like, "Nah, I wasn't suspicious about the gummy bears, but now I'm suspicious about the gummy bears."
Yeah, they're literally flowered in cocaine, so you're going to
This
have a lot of
drink
energy.
totally isn't roofied, guys. There's nothing. You don't have to worry about this drink.
No, I'm a good person. Trust me. Believe me. All right. All right. So, Paige, it's been great. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much.
This has been the 160th episode of the Redacted Culture Cast.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. We're that far in, and
Holy shit, you're on it, dog.
We are just rolling through, but we've got quite a few people. So I look forward to seeing you probably at SHOT Show this year. And then other than that, happy Thanksgiving. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Girls with their nails done.